Horus Lupercal arrested more power than anybody had ever possessed, and he managed to unleash the Immaterium upon reality. When he did this, the Warp, Terror, the Vengeful Spirit, the Inevitable City, all of them were in one place. Direction was meaningless, time was meaningless, everything was spilling into everything else, and even death no longer held any meaning. Therefore, when Sanguinius walked through the Vengeful Spirit, he noticed that his dead brothers were with him, and not just them, but the mortal remains of those demonic brothers, those mortal remains that had been cast into the warp. They walked along and watched with him, and Sanguinius realized the truth. They were there for his funeral.
"Brother," Horus says, "each syllable burdens the air, making it shudder to bear the weight. My brother, my dear brother, I waited for you for so long. You have come, as I hoped you would. I have missed you." "You hoped I would come?" asks Sanguinius. His words, strong and clear, sound thin and insubstantial after the crushed mass density of Horus's voice. "You knew I would come." "You were ever your own soul, dear brother," Lupercal replies. "I could not trust in fate or destiny or even chance to bring you here. It had to be your choice. My heart is full that this is the choice you made." "And my heart is full to see you again," Sanguinius replies. "Despite all that has taken place, I have mourned the loss of my brother Horus. I would not have let this monstrous war end without seeing you, with my own eyes, one last time. Monstrous it is, and end it must. I abhor it, and wish it to be finished. But, my brother, this does not have to be the last time we stand face to face." "I think it must." "Why so?" "You are not the brother I remember. You are changed. The warp is upon you, Horus, and I fight terror just to look upon you. No need, oh brother, no need for fear. The warp is indeed upon me, and within me, because all things change. You must know this. You, of all people, you have seen it. You know, in that, we are alike." Lupercal pauses, the echo of his last words rolling away to the edges of the chamber like discarded thunder. Slowly, he raises his left fist and points the head of the huge mace towards the 5 gigantic thrones set against the towering rear wall of the court. "One is for you," he says. "There will be a coronation. I have dreamed of this. Join me." "It is too late, brother," Sanguinius replies. "Nothing is too late. I decide what is and is not, and even time obeys me. Make a wise choice, dear brother. I have longed for your company." "This is your offer." "This is my offer. Please accept it. It is why I have waited for you. It is why I have chosen to meet with you." He raises his right hand, the scythe talons of his power claw gently beckon. "Join me." Sanguinius turns his left side towards his brother. He bows his head, eyes closed for a second, and when he raises it again, the blade and carmine comes up with it, raised prefer his right shoulders. He opens his eyes and meets Horus's gaze, unblinking. "And this is why I have chosen to meet with you," he answers. "To fight me, to end you. But you will die." "Everyone dies, brother." "Not me. This is your decision." "Yes," says Sanguinius. Horus stares at him. A single tear wells from his eye and trickles down his cheek. "Pity," he says.
You know, I often start these streams somewhat nervous, and then I hear the dialogue that Dan Abnett has written, and I'm like immediately hyped. It's crazy that we actually have this scene written out now. I will say, of everything in the Horus Heresy, this is one of the things that plays out basically like the old lore always intended it to do so. So there are some changes that you might have picked up on when you listen to that. So when Horus talks to Sanguinius, he talks about how there's a chair, there's a space for you during my coronation. I will say Horus did always want Sanguinius to fall, but now we have kind of a specific idea of what Sanguinius's purpose would have been in Horus's new Imperium. And that purpose is actually to represent Nurgle, not Khorne, which is through a lot of people, but actually Nurgle, that cycle of death and life he thought would be very appealing to Sanguinius, because of course one of his greatest fears, or something that he's known for a long time, is his imminent death. But Horus Lupercal was turned away by Sanguinius, and he held true. The build-up to this obviously goes through most of the Horus heresy. St. Cygnus Prime, Erebus tries to turn Sanguinius in Fear to Tread, and we always knew that Sanguinius would have been the greatest trophy for Horus. And not only that, but Horus's love for Sanguinius probably outstrips his love for any of the other brothers, maybe Fulgrim, but the love is clearly there, because one of the things we find out quite early on in the heresy is that Sanguinius's curse, his original curse, the Red Thirst, was actually witnessed by Horus during the Great Crusade. And Horus promised Sanguinius that he would never tell their father about the Red Thirst. And he never does. He keeps it secret. And that shows the level of bond that they have, because Sanguinius is very much fearful that the Emperor might, purge his legion if he ever found out about the Red Thirst, a flaw within his gene seed. And Sanguinius is sought after by Horus throughout the heresy, and he's very much afraid of Sanguinius. That's why he sends Sanguinius across the galaxy when he becomes War Master. He doesn't want to face his brother right now. And I've always been curious as to why Sanguinius went onto the Vengeful Spirit. Why was it that he willingly went to his own death? And this is explained to quite some degree in The End and the Death Volume 1 and 2. So the Emperor has also foreseen Sanguinius's death. And he actually says to Sanguinius, don't come with me. Stay on Terra, stay with Vulcan in the throne room, and I'll go to the Vengeful Spirit. There's no point you going on and you just dying. And Sanguinius actually says no, and he wants to go to fight Horus. But basically the idea is that Horus has trapped Terra in a single day. And so the prophecy of the day you meet Horus, or the day you fight Horus, is the day you die, probably doesn't come true, or might not come true, because the day is now meaningless. So he actually thought he'd kind of get around the prophecy. And to be fair, that is kind of the logic implied by Ahriman as to why the Dark King prophecy changes. This idea that when you trap Terra in a single day, then fate is confounded. And so Sanguinius thought he could confound fate also. And to be honest, it seems that Horus also has the same plan, because he has foreseen that the day he fights Sanguinius is the day he will die. But Horus has a similar idea, and Horus does literally control time at this point in the Siege of Terra. So he's very confident that he can beat the Emperor. But I will say, Chris, thank you so much for the super chat, man. Merry Christmas to everybody. Yes, I thought this would be a really fun topic to talk about as we're so close to Christmas, because in 40K they do celebrate Sanguinius' death as a major holiday on a lot of worlds throughout the Imperium. So this is kind of their Christmas. But onto the actual fight in terms of how things go. So the fight is largely as you'd imagine it would. So Sanguinius is usually thought of to be the best Primarch when it comes to martial combat and fighting. And this is something that's wildly down to opinion, but Sanguinius is a consistent Primarch put into the top echelons when other Primarchs evaluate their brothers. So Leman Russ, Angron, Corvus Corax, they all put Sanguinius kind of right at the top. And other Primarchs like Leman Russ or the Lion or Horus, they sometimes dip in and out of the top spots, but very few are consistently up there like Sanguinius is. So he's generally thought to be the best Primarch. And certainly Horus was very scared of Sanguinius before he got his glow up after going through the gate at Molech. And after he goes through the gate at Molech, this very important planet in 40k, he comes out and he has more power than we've ever seen, and he can now take on the Emperor. Sanguinius does hold his own really well versus Horus at the start. As the fight begins, Sanguinius decides to use his main strength against Horus, which is of course his wings. So he takes to the skies, continually attacks Horus again and again. He's far faster than Horus and, delivers blow after blow. And we get to this point where Sanguinius has actually beaten Horus to his knees. And he actually offers Horus a swift death. He says, do you want to meet Father like this? Do you want to meet Father when you're like this form? Or do you want me to just give you a quick death now because you're my brother and this is, me showing you that I love you really? And it's, very much a mercy killing because the Emperor would unleash, untold fury upon him. And Horus says there is no mercy. As Sanguinius goes to deliver the killing stroke unbelievably fast, Worldbreaker stops it, Horus's mace. And Horus rises and he can heal all of his wounds. And Horus actually reveals that he was kind of just looking for a contest throughout the fight. He wasn't really, unleashing his full power. He was really just holding back. He was hoping that somehow Sanguinius might see the flaws in his plan here and he might maybe turn towards chaos. And so he's holding out hope that maybe he can corrupt his brother. But Sanguinius doesn't, of course. He holds true. And when Sanguinius sees that Horus has been holding back this entire fight, which is a cataclysmic battle, of course, between these two Primarchs, he obviously starts to panic a bit. Then he unleashes everything. He's just going for killstroke after killstroke. But Horus reveals just how powerful he has become. He actually ends up grabbing Sanguinius by the ankle, and it's like that scene in the first Avengers, and he's smashing Sanguinius up and down. It is a brutal scene, and Sanguinius, can't catch his breath. Horus just kind of watches Sanguinius as he's everything's broken, and he breaks a wing, and he breaks a bunch of other bones. Primarchs can heal, but he's in very bad shape, and Horus actually watches him just kind of struggle to go pick up the blade in Carmine, his sword, and he just allows him to do it. And then Sanguinius is beaten again and again by Horus until eventually Horus decides enough is enough. Let's end this.
It takes just a moment, though he has all the time in the world. Horus Lupercal holds all of time stilled in one hand, and Sanguinius in the other. Sanguinius, broken beyond measure, gazes up at the soaring arches of the Lupercal court. Even broken, he will not go quietly. Even broken, he will not make this easy. Lupercal growls. Does he relish this, hate it, consider it an annoying waste of time when he has better things to do? There is no way to fathom him, for he is no longer remotely human. And Sanguinius doesn't care. He can feel the gaze of the old four on him, staring from the shadows with eyes as bleak and wicked as the one adorning his brother's breastplate. They have come to witness this and everything that will follow. They mutter to each other excitedly, and around them the numberless legions of their spawn gibber and whisper in delight. Sanguinius can feel the sheer size of them, the mass of the dark gods. He will show them the defiance of mankind to his last breath. Horus lifts him off the ground, pincered in his talon. Every fractured bone and tear in Sanguinius's body shrieks as he hangs there. Blood blurts from between his lips, squeezed out of his body. Worldbreaker rises in the monster's other hand. Sanguinius lashes out with his left hand, gouging desperate fingers at his brother's cheek and eyes. Horus barks in rage and drops his prey. Sanguinius falls onto his knees, jarring every wound, then topples onto his side. He wants to be on his feet when it happens. Worldbreaker catches him before he is even back on his knees. The clubbing blow breaks his left shoulder, ribs, and left femur. He collapses, trying not to scream from pain, and failing. Horus starts to bludgeon him, beating him repeatedly like a disobedient dog. There is no art in this anymore, no martial skill, no patience. Worldbreaker shreds armour and flesh. It pulverizes both collarbones. It ruptures a lung. A fine drizzle of blood fumes the air around the figure, the brutal beating giant and his prey. The sixth hammering impact twists Sanguinius' head around, shattering his jaw and transmitting such force that the skin on the left half of his face, from brow to chin, is flayed loose. It flutters, then drifts back like a slack mask. As he falls forward, the talon vices him again. It lifts the ruined, tattered angel into the air, until he is face to face with the first found instrument of chaos. Horus squeezes slowly. He is expecting some last word, some immortal and heroic declaration to mark the end of a majestic, noble life. It ought to be something good, something appropriate. But Sanguinius is no longer capable of speech. He is drowning in his own blood. The claws close. There is a double crack of spine and neck. Horus waits. Blood drips. It's done. The talon opens with a mechanical clack. His brother's corpse, so loose and mangled it seems almost boneless, drops to the deck. An ugly sound of impact to mark an ugly ending. Horus sighs and walks away. Things scurry from the shadows to nail the body up.
God damn, it is a really brutal scene, and I'm going to add a little bit more brutality on before we talk about that. So one thing that happens in the previous chapter is, of course, Sanguinius's final word. So as he's beaten to death by Horus, he tries to fly one final time, and Horus grabs him, and he ends up flying into this big altar, and Horus grabs him up by the hair, and he stares face to face into the skull of Ferrus Manus. Sanguinius's last word is Manus, and it is an absolutely brutal scene. But as you can see, that's the final chapter. There is another chapter before that, which again is just Sanguinius not only being beaten repeatedly, but beaten, and then Horus allowing him to get up just so he can beat him again. There's a bit where Horus talks about how, maybe I should be merciful and offer a swift death to Sanguinius, because Sanguinius did offer a swift death to Horus. And Horus thinks about it and then goes, actually, you know what? I did say there was no mercy, and I should probably keep my promises. So he just is absolutely merciless in how he dispatches his brother. Just to say for a minute, Mark, thanks so much for being a member for a month. And Murphy, you absolute legend. Thank you so much for gifting some memberships. I forgot to say, this is actually my birthday week. So it's my birthday on the 22nd, which is, I think, Friday. Yeah, thank you so much for the support. It means the world. And if you are watching the stream, please do like and subscribe. All that good stuff if you're enjoying it. Thank you so much. Let's back to the video. So Sanguinius' death, and that, what I talked about there, this idea of Ferrus Manus' skull being shown to Sanguinius, actually goes back to something that happened earlier in the book. So Ferrus Manus actually comes to Sanguinius, or at least his ghost, or what we think is his ghost. It's not entirely clear, because Horus could have created some sort of illusion to trick Ferrus Manus, or trick Sanguinius into thinking that he's seeing Ferrus Manus. But after fighting his way through the vengeful spirit, Sanguinius and his sons end up taking on, I think it's 3 companies of sons of Horus and a horde of word bearers, and they're outnumbered 8-1 in terms of their Astartes. However, Sanguinius goes on a killing machine. Of course, he is said to have been the only Primarch that could do this. I should say, if someone like Dawn had analysed this, it would have been a no-win scenario, but Sanguinius is just obviously fury. This is where all the black rage is coming from, I should say. This is where he keeps screaming Horus's names, like, Horus, you bastard, I'm going to gut you. It should be said that the black rage is already building in the Blood Angels back on Terra. We see it through their perspective, so the black rage, it will be kind of instantaneous, but it's also not. So they're already starting to see Sanguinius's memories back on Terra. They can kind of see through his eyes as he's going through the vengeful spirit. They can see that he's going to fight against his brother. Things are really hitting up. In the end, Sanguinius ends up just taking out Sons of Horus dreadnought, and there's a break in the wall, and he goes through the wall. He asks his sons to hold it, and Sanguinius goes off on his own. He's kind of in the darkness, and then he runs into Ferrus Manus, who Sanguinius, of course, thinks is some sort of warp trick. They have a big conversation, and a lot of things are discussed there. So one of the things I mentioned right at the start, he talks about how when Sanguinius hears the moaning of Primarchs, he realizes that he recognizes those moans because they're the moans of people like Angron, and they're like the remains of his mortality that were thrown into the warp when they ascended to demonhood. So things are getting absolutely nuts. Ferrus Manus' main job there is to kind of talk about and encourage Sanguinius to go and take on Horus, because all of them, they want Horus to lose. They want Sanguinius to kill Horus because Horus should pay for what he's done. And Sanguinius, takes a bit of talking for him to be properly ready and ready to go and face his brother, but eventually he is, and he finds him in the room. One of the really horrific things that Ferrus Manus talks about is how horrible it is to be dead in Warhammer 40K, because he talks about how they're all attacked by demons in the warp all the time. They're sought after and attacked and devoured by demons as their souls drift in the warp. So it's brutal. It's really savage. So classic 40K there. But then Sanguinius finds the clone room, finds the throne room, and he fights against Horus. And in this novel, Horus talks about how foolish Sanguinius was to think that he could kind of trick a prophecy. It was a bad idea, and it just didn't work. What makes it more brutal is Horus slows down time as he slams Sanguinius into the floor. That is true. He allows him to kind of savor the pain even more. And as Sanguinius comes to, it's said that, because he passes out and it comes to, it's said that when that happens, he just feels the pain. I think it makes it much more sense why Horus puts down the shields now. Absolutely. So that was a very big question people had in terms of why did Horus ever lower the shields on the Vengeful Spirit when he was on the cusp of winning? Ferrus Manus makes it very clear in this book, and Sanguinius, that Sanguinius, Dawn, Vulcan, Constantine, and the Emperor, they were all tricked by Horus. So there's a specific wording used by Ferrus Manus that I think might come up in the final book. Ferrus says that Horus put his mind into his past. And throughout the first book, you might have noticed if you read it, that he's continually talking to Space Marines that are dead and brothers that are dead. He's having meetings that happened long ago. And so there's this idea that he kept his mind in the past to make the Emperor think that he's insane, so that the Emperor will go onto the Vengeful Spirit to fight him. Because now that Horus has revealed his full power, the Emperor now knows that he can't beat Horus. So he probably never would have gone onto the Vengeful Spirit if the Emperor had known that Horus was as powerful as he is. And so it's definitely worth remembering, for future reference when these things get talked about. It's that I know people like Abaddon like to say Horus is a fool, and I guess maybe there is going to be some logic to that. And Horus does lose, but fundamentally, to this point in the Horus heresy, Horus has won. He's done everything correctly. Whatever it's going to be that changes the tide and, allows the Emperor to beat Horus is some unforeseen thing. Might be Alanius Pius and John Grammaticus messing with time. It's going to be some crazy thing that we haven't thought of before. There's one line in the first book about Ol's dagger being one of the only things that can harm Horus at his current power level. So that's what makes me think Ol's still going to play a part. But at this point in the Siege of Terra, Ol is actually leaving, and he's going to go through time to create a causal loop so that he always talks to the Emperor and always talks about becoming the Dark King. If that doesn't make sense to you, I should say, sorry, you have to watch my other videos on it. It's quite a complicated thing. But yeah, it's a really good question. Now we know why Horus lowered the shields. Is the ultimate general according to Ferrus, and he played them all for fools. Do you think he is dead? I do think there's a chance that we might see Sanguinius in the final book, purely in the same sense that we saw Ferrus Manus now. I thought it was quite savage to not give us any indication that Sanguinius puts a chink in Horus's armor. I guess earlier I did say technically that not much had changed, and this was always kind of mythology, so I guess I have a lower bar for it. But technically, if that was something you were expecting, a clear chink in Horus's armor, that hasn't come whatsoever, I would say, from this book. I will say there's a bit where Sanguinius talks about getting Horus angry as they're fighting, and he tries to get Horus rageful, and that does happen. He does get super angry during the fight, but when that happens, Afterwards, it's revealed that Horus was in control the whole time and could heal his wounds and actually wasn't really threatened by Sanguinius and actually, you know, could just defeat him at any point he wanted. So I don't even think that that properly worked. And also, I don't see how that's a chink in the armor. But if there is going to be some sort of chink in Horus's armor, I think it might come from the ghost of Sanguinius fighting alongside the Emperor against Horus somehow. That's what I would guess will happen, because, like I say, we've seen Ferrus Manus in this book. It would be nice to have Ferrus, to be fair, as well. Maybe we will see Ferrus Manus' ghost and Sanguinius' ghost fighting with the Emperor against Horus. We've already seen Ferrus be summoned by the Emperor during the war within the Webway. So potentially, we might see the Emperor summon his 2 lost sons, or at least one of them. And maybe that's the difference. Maybe that's what's going to happen. And that would make sense in terms of why we don't know about that in 40k, because nobody would know. Assumingly, Kekautus, Loken, and Litu will all die. So no one would have the knowledge of the fact that the Emperor actually managed to summon one of his sons. That's my best guess, honestly. But yeah, Dan Abnett has written it very well. I'll be honest, I'm not going to lie to you and pretend I have like a really solid theory. I'm just really excited to read this final book, to be honest. It's it's pretty great. People are giving the Emperor way too much credit, believing everything is part of his plan. Yeah, that's true. He does get a lot of stuff wrong. I think one thing that was actually really interesting that in the End of the Death is that the Emperor says specifically that his foresight is not as good as Sanguinius's. That is definitely true of some abilities. In some abilities, the Primarchs are better than the Emperor, but overall, of course, he's a far more powerful being, and he can always kind of psychically augment his abilities. But Sanguinius' foresight isn't that good, and the Emperor's is not as good. So the Emperor does get stuff wrong, and that's probably why he's kind of very panicked during the Great Crusade, because I'd imagine he's had views of various threats, and he knows the threats are coming, things like the Tyranids and the Necrons, but he doesn't know what time frame they're coming in. So he just wants humanity to get unified as quickly as possible. We know Sanguinius' soul is trapped on the Vengeful Spirit. If the ship is destroyed, will we get the angel back as a Primarch? That's a good question. There are 4 parts of Sanguinius' soul that we know about in 40k. So in the Black Legion, on the Vengeful Spirit, we do see this kind of echo of Sanguinius' soul. We see this ghost on the Vengeful Spirit of Sanguinius, which is true. But there's also kind of 3 others. So the first is the obvious one, Sanguinor. The second is now Mephiston, which is this black angel. Is kind of is opposite to the Sanguinor, which represents the black rage of the Blood Angels, but seemingly something kind of more sinister in addition. And that Mephiston ends up embodying this black angel. So he's kind of he's got part of Sanguinius in him as well. And then the final part is the Bloody Angel, which is something that I don't think people talk about very often. It says it's not Sanguinius, but it looks like Sanguinius, and it speaks to Mephiston in Darkness and the Blood. And that seems potentially to be in the middle of Mephiston and the Sanguinor. So potentially that's maybe closest to what Sanguinius is. Why was Horus so much stronger than Sanguinius? So the reason Horus is so much more stronger than Sanguinius is quite frankly just because the Dark Gods have invested within Horus more power than they have ever invested within anyone. So just far more power than they ever invested in the Emperor, for example. So the Emperor stole a lot of their power, but not as much as they get put in Horus. And it's just said that Horus has got more power than anyone ever before. So there's a book called Vengeful Spirit, which is the book that covers this. Horus goes through a gate on a planet called Moleg, which takes you to the realm of chaos, and that's the same gate that the Emperor went to. When he comes back, he looks like he's aged 1,000 years. So he serves like 1,000 years fighting wars in the warp for the Dark Gods, and then he returns and he's got all of these gifts. He's so much more powerful, and Sanguinius is just not a match. I'm expecting it to come from Leman Russ's wound with the Emperor's spear. Potentially, it would be really good to get some relevance for that. Yeah, so that would be a really cool idea. Leman Russ's storyline is essentially nullified by the plot of Slaves to Darkness. So it would be very cool to give Leman Russ some relevance in the heresy, and that would be a good way to do it. I'm doubtful of that purely because the plot of Slaves to Darkness was to heal him. I mean, likewise, I would say, for example, one of the things this book kind of makes clear, or hints at very strongly, is that Sanguinius was going to die anyway. Sanguinius was always going to die because the wound Angron inflicted upon him. He's got the black blade. The black blade is a sword of Angron's that's very, very powerful and can poison you. And it's actually the blade that is destroyed by Hyperion in the Gifts of the Emperor. And Sanguinius getting poisoned by that, seemingly he couldn't be healed from. I don't know if the Emperor would have been able to heal it, but he sees the Emperor and the wound continues to affect him. So it looked like Sanguinius was going to die anyway before he fights against Horus. And throughout the fights, Sanguinius is definitely weakened by that wound, even when he's fighting against Sons of Horus earlier in the book. They can kind of like punch him in the wound. It's a bit of a cheap shot, but if you punch him in his gouge, he does kind of keel over a bit. Poor Sanguinius went into this fight thinking Horus was old Horus. Horus seems quite convinced in the fight that Sanguinius is holding back. He doesn't actually want to kill Horus because he's hoping Horus will relent. And so yeah, he kind of pulls his punches ever so slightly. But yeah, wouldn't have mattered, I don't think, anyway. Emperor beats Horus by making a deal with the Pantheon to become a 5th Chaos God, then backs out like he did when he stole from them. That's a cool theory, Chris. I like that. That's very cool. Because it's one of the things that Sanguinius, I think I covered it in that passage there, Sanguinius notices in the book, is that the Chaos Gods are watching him and they're all like chatting about it and they're gossiping. Potentially, and the Emperor can plead to the Chaos Gods if he wants to make some sort of deal. So that could be pretty cool. That could be very interesting. And maybe that goes back to, there's a very popular idea that people have in this community about like this current setting being ideal for the Chaos Gods and them actually kind of really enjoying this. But, or maybe it's the case that he actually manipulates them in a way, because one of the things we forget about the Chaos Gods, I guess, is that they actually hate aligning. They really loathe it. They hate each other like almost as much as they hate the Emperor. They loathe each other. The hatred of the Emperor is basically the only thing that gets them to align. Like, you know, ever since Be'lakor, they hate it. And what the Emperor could do, in theory, is maybe try and play to their ego and encourage them, get them to turn on each other. And maybe that will take some of the power away from Horus. And so the Emperor can then exploit that. Maybe we'll see something like that. I don't know. Do you think Sanguinius could get resurrected momentarily by Big E, which leads to the Black Rage? I do think there's a chance we will see Sanguinius being resurrected, as it were. But I don't think that will be the cause of the Black Rage. I think the Black Rage is going to be exactly what it was before. It's going to be this idea that, his death now is going to cause some kind of psychic backlash. The most interesting idea for the Black Rage in recent lore for me is the ideas explored in the recent Blood Angels books and Mephiston books, especially where the Black Rage, although it was delivered through the psychic imprint left by Sanguinius' death, the reason the Blood Angels have that and the Iron Warrior, the Iron Fist and the Iron Hands don't, is because Sanguinius came to embody these two kind of deities of Baal that existed on Baal long before Sanguinius did. And so they essentially instilled this capacity for the Black Rage within him, which was then unleashed upon the Blood Angels. That's my theory of how the Black Rage works. But I do think that, we're going to see that kind of take over the Blood Angels in the next book, which is going to be very, very cool. I'm expecting Loken to live so he can reap his words from the start of the Horus Heresy. I think that he kind of doesn't need to live for that to happen. I think he'll probably die watching the final fight. And but it could do. I'd be interested to see who lives. Is a really interesting question. It's such an interesting one because the impact is monumental. Like one of the things that we don't really have in 40k is proper like perpetuals like we get in the Horus Heresy. And if any of them survive, the implications are quite extreme. So I'm interested to see who survives. That's gonna be pretty cool. Isn't his armor damaged from Wolf Spear stab? He was damaged, but I think all of his armor is tip-top shape now. I think ever since Slaves to Darkness, he's back to full form. I think you want that to be the case as well. Generally, I think from the writer's point of view, for it to be a climactic battle of the Emperor versus Horus, given that we know the Emperor has to win, you want Horus to be on full might when he's fighting against his father. Can't wait to see the Blood Angels rampage. Yes, Mark, that is going to be a hell of a scene. I can't wait to see that. I mean, the traitors are about to overrun everyone, so that would be a really interesting way to push back. You know, it's worth bearing in mind again that, like, in this book, the Blood Angels win 8-1 against the traitors, with Sanguinius, to be fair. But when they fall to the Black Rage, they do get some of Sanguinius's strength, and they do get some of Sanguinius's courage and well, they go mad, but they do get his strength. And so it'll be interesting to see how good they are against the traitors. So it'll be pretty cool. So you think we will see the return of the Dark King Armageddon plot with the grow up of the Star Child? Not anytime soon, but I think we definitely will see it. So the book is very clear that the Dark King is gone for now. It puts for now very clearly hinting at the idea that it will one day return. All right, guys, I think I'm going to call it there. If you do enjoy this kind of video, please do like and subscribe and all of that good stuff. Thank you so much for watching it live if you did. Thanks to everyone who supports the channel. If you want to join the channel, you can do so through the join button on the page below, and then get access to the Discord and get access to extra content, which is always good, right? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.